for being on time. If you want to say something, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you, or you may send me in chat. Okay, so live stream is on. I'll start by inviting our speaker for today, which is Mr. Harsh Agrawal. Harsh is a look development technical director with years of experience in the entertainment industry. While at Pixar Animation Studios, he worked on Oscar-winning movies Coco and Toy Story 4. In fact, Toy Story 4 is very special for me. That was the first movie I saw in a 4D cinema in Ahmedabad. The chairs also move, and then there was a scene outside when they were going for a picnic, and they also had scent. Some perfume came from one of the fans. Harsh is currently with ILM Lucasfilm, where he has worked on Oscar-nominated movies Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, and Avengers Endgame. In this interactive presentation, Harsh will be sharing his experiences and walk us through the basics of the production pipeline in the studios, but mostly keeping it open for any questions. And Harsh has emphasized that this will be very interactive, so please do ask questions. If you're not comfortable asking a question, you can send it to me on chat and I can ask it on your behalf if your audio is not working or if your video is not working. But as much as possible, we would like you to interact with him. So keep your video on and raise your hand when you want to ask a question. Harsh has done Bachelor of Fine Arts from Savannah College of Art and Design and Bachelor of Science from City University of Hong Kong. Okay. So Harsh, over to you now.
Thanks, Gagan. Thanks for the great introduction. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me correctly, and let me know if there's any kind of glitches or whatever. This is very informal, just to go with it. Gagan actually reached out to me, and he wanted to share with you guys how the production process of filmmaking works and the visual effects side of things, and also in the animation industry, like where does computer graphic fit in, and also the art side of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a breakdown video of Star Wars, and then I'm going to show you some of my showreel and the kind of work I do. That way you get an idea for where I'm coming from, and then I'm going to start giving you more details into the production process itself and the pipeline. So let me share my screen. And I believe you also have the links to the videos in public domain. So share. Okay. Okay. Can you all see the shared screen? I played the video. Hopefully the sound is not overpowering. These are just compositing breakdowns, mostly done in 2D. It's match moving and compositing. You can see a little puppet action going on there. So you can see how there's like a on-set shot and how we use 3D on top of it with some camera tracking and motion tracking. It's the Pasana desert environment. So all of this is CG, except the characters. Well, that's actually a good breakdown, if you don't mind me pausing and going over. So this is something that I created, so I know pretty well. So hold up. So this is Pasana environment, and you can see the TIE fighter coming in. And what you see right now is the model of the ship. And you can see the wireframes. And as it moves, you can see the colors. Those are the different kinds of textures and lighting. And we try to match it the CG asset to the real life shot and blend the two to make it look seamless. Same over here, you can see how it works together. These are effects elements. Those are comped on top. NAS. Lots of Star Destroyers. It's a really complicated asset because the sheer amount of geometry you can see on screen. So fun fact about these tunnels. So these tunnels is also something that I've worked on. So these ice tunnels, they're kind of like a maze. And if you think about it, there's Stardust, like all the ships, and the scale of this tunnel is really hard to sell. And if we were to kind of make everything from scratch, let's say model everything step by step, it's going to take forever. Usually we want to get something much quickly. So all of the stuff that you see on screen in terms of ice tunnel is all procedural and dynamically generated with a few nodes and some code and whatnot. But it's mostly a cube with a shader. So here you can see all the different breakdowns. So let me see if I can pause it. So this is the geometry. So you can see there's different icicles and all the industrial elements. And we want to make sure the industrial elements kind of blends with the ice. And at the contact point, you want to get some icicles because these machineries are working slightly hotter and they would kind of melt the ice, and you would that ice would kind of freeze once it melts. So we're trying to introduce as much detail as possible in model. And then this shot here, you can see on the screen, right, different kinds of textures and the light refracting through the wall. And then within the ice wall, you can see multiple machineries and elements as well. So quite a complex shot with to render. The pier environment. Again, the water effects is amazing, so something to look out for, all this amazing white water. These are instanced Star Destroyers to save memory. You can see the amount of Star Destroyers in the sea. Again, if you all have any kind of question, feel free to ask or put in the chat together. All right. Yeah, that was just a breakdown for Star Wars. I'm going to go into more details about different aspects of the pipeline in a bit. So next, I'm going to share with you the work that I do, which is texturing and look dev. That's what I specialize in. So this is basically a collection of some of the work that I've done in the past. And on the bottom, you can kind of read like some of the stuff that I've done, like details about each shot. the time travel suit. A lot of challenges in terms of fitting various characters, because same suit was worn by Hulk and the same suit is worn by Iron Man. A lot of action here. CG cars, if they want to describe real cars. Comic Carl Juniors. They are my favorite. Lots of skeletons here. I'll give you a breakdown of skeleton shading at the start today. That should help. These are just some personal projects that I do on the side, apart from movie making, just to practice. Or watercolors and stuff. Okay, so does the basic introduction, and next we're going to go to Pixar in a box. But essentially, what you all can see is I specialize in texture and look dev, and what look development is basically deciding how a character or environment is supposed to look like. So using the various materials and textures and references, and they're all based on story. You need to kind of think about how to integrate that with real life and visual effects versus an animation where everything is CG already. So these things are quite important, because even as you notice, like some dirt marks on the face can tell you a lot about the story, about the character and what they have gone through throughout the story. And these kind of details are really important. You might not catch it, at first sight, like when you see the movie, but if it's missing, you would definitely feel it, that there's something missing, and it would kind of break that empathy and the reality. It would take you out of the movie. So we want to make sure we get all the details right. So this next video is Pixar in a Box. This is a collaboration with Khan Academy and Pixar Animation Studio. So this is something that we created to give you a basic idea of production process in Pixar. And just remember, Pixar is a 3D animation studio, which is slightly different from visual effects and live action, because these are completely done in-house, and there is no real life photography, so to speak. Although we do real life photography for references, but what this is going to show you is like go through different departments and what they do, and give you a brief idea of what modeling is, what texturing is, what is layout, and all that kind of stuff.
At Pixar, on any given day, we're working on various stages of many films.
Friend.
But it all begins with an idea.
For example, Toy Story started with the notion that when kids leave the room, their toys come to life. And honestly, I was convinced that my toys did that.
Our films start in story. Along with the director and the writer, we figure out what happens using simple drawings.
It's kind of like a comic book.
Exactly. And while we're drawing, production designers and their teams start designing the world and the characters. While they're painting and drawing and sculpting, our storyboards go to editorial, where they string together all the drawings that we've created.
We time them out, add music, dialogue, and sound effects.
He was the only one who knew what the heck was going on!
And as these shots go through each stage in production, we'll update this scene over and over again. And this is where the science and the math come in.
Who knew what the heck was going on?
next? Pipeline. We're ready to start making the film you'll see in the theater, and this happens in a particular order. It's time for our technical artists to figure out how to create the movie in the computer.
I've been here for 9 years, and I still have no idea how you guys turn our drawings into the finished film.
To be honest, something stumps us on every movie.
Hey, Galen.
Hey.
You've been here since Toy Story. What's been hard on each film?
Well, on Toy Story, everything. Here, let me show you. On Toy Story, we were inventing the entire process from scratch. Monsters Incorporated, fur and clothing. On Cars, reflective metal surfaces. On every new film, there's a new technical challenge. On Inside Out, we had to deal with a character made of glowing particles, and it took lots of people to figure out just that one thing.
Whoa, what is she made of?
Her shape will be made of points and particles of light. She was tough. This is the 17th version.
And the characters have to move, so someone has to add controls to the model.
Like a puppet, right?
Yes, except instead of strings, our animators will use a computer program to move the characters in a digital world. Next in the pipeline, sets.
So for Cars 2, you built the entire city of London?
We needed a huge chunk of the city because Mater and McQueen speed through it. So we figured out how to grow buildings with enough variation for them to look real.
And we moved through that set with our virtual cameras. Next up, animation.
I do know what the animators do. They bring the characters to life.
You see how she's moving, but her clothes and hair are missing? Adding and moving those elements is going to be someone else's job further down the pipeline. And by somebody else, I mean me, and about 20 other simulation technical artists.
Where are you getting all these shirts? We have to build everything you see, including the textures and surfaces, which help make the world and characters believable.
Next up, lighting.
Ironically, it's really dark in the lighting department. So when you start, there are no lights?
No. Any source of light is something we have to add into the scene. In this shot alone, there are 230 lights.
Last up, the render farm.
A film is really a series of images, or frames. There's 24 of them every second.
This is where we make the frames. Everything comes together here, all the art, math, and science. A single frame can take more than 24 hours to render, and that's just one frame, and that's assuming we don't run into any snags.
All right. So that was basically giving you an idea of what the pipeline looks like. I think that was pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to ask. But this is kind of what it looks like, right? It starts with an idea, goes into story, scripts, and you know, all the design work which happens in pre-production, which is the 2D phase. Not to say design, it happens in parallel. Like obviously, a big chunk of it happens in the beginning, but we can keep reiterating as we go. Yeah, and once those designs are done, then we move into 3D side of things, which is modeling, shading. Meanwhile, we're also doing layout, animation, and simulation. But you can see it has sort of a linear flow, except like few departments you can kind of move back and forth. And each of the departments is next to each other. They have heavy interaction, so modeling and shading kind of thrive together. And then we will also go back and forth between simulation, some animation, and then everything feeds to lighting in the end, where we light all these 3D information, and that goes into the final render, which is the giant render farm to output the final frames. Compositing wise, as this is Pixar's pipeline, so it doesn't rely as heavily on compositing. But if you were to talk about any kind of live action movie like Avengers or Star Wars, because we do a lot of shoot, there's a lot of compositing that needs to happen, and we render things in multiple layers, like for example, just reflections in one layer or maybe colors in one layer, and then we composite those things together to form the final image. Okay, so what else I was going to share? Let me see if my keynote is ready. Okay, maybe let's start with the other keynote. Sorry, I'm like very disorganized. So this is one of the Renderman talks that I presented like a while back, and thanks to Dylan Sisson and Renderman team for sharing this. I'm not going to go through this whole thing because I'm actually not aware of how deep we are into RenderMan, but I'm at least gonna give you a basic idea of a breakdown of Coco and Incredibles. Everyone can see the slide, right? This is RenderMan latest developments. Thumbs up. Cool. So let me just move. Production rendering. So I don't know if people know what RenderMan is. RenderMan is one of the rendering engines developed by Pixar. This is one of the most widely used rendering engine across various companies to make all kinds of movies. Let's see. Coco. Okay, so let's talk about Coco. Yeah, ambitious for sure. So as you can see on the screen, this is the first like concept art of the Land of the Dead. And when you see this and you think about how would you tackle this, you know, like how would you create this in real life, like or in 3D? But think of it as like if you were to be tasked to create this environment in real life, like model each one of them, place all those tiny little lights, and make this big world. It's a challenging task by itself, let alone making it and then moving cameras through it, shooting. It's kind of like creating a giant Disneyland, you know, to shoot in. But we have to do that in 3D, and that's where RenderMan helps. So one of the biggest challenge in this shot was the amount of lights, right? Like it's already like, you know, millions and millions of lights. So as you can see, 4.72 lights per pixel. So how would you handle all that data? And that's where there's a lot of optimizations that we do. So one is point cloud, we do instancing, and RenderMan really helps in this scenario to optimize this. Art pushes the technology and also the other way around, which is great. Let's go Incredibles 2. So yeah, now after Coco, like if you look at Incredibles 2 on the other hand, it's deceiving because it looks very simple, right? Like there's only like few lights versus when you see that complex scene. But as we have grown with our rendering engines, we're being smart and we're actually following the live action concept. Like if you were to shoot this in real life, you would have these families sit there. There would be a main key light. There would be a guy with a bounce card, you know, kind of bouncing the light. So our rendering engines are becoming more and more physically accurate. And what that allows us to do is kind of think of movies just like live action. Although we are sitting here on our computers and like making it, we can still get similar results. Yeah, so you can see a difference between like 2004 Incredibles versus 2018. The lights definitely feel much more realistic. The fall off of the lights and the shadows and the fill lights and everything feels much more natural versus, you know, it looks a bit more graphical in the 2004 version here. And yeah, of course, it's fewer lights. So when you look at the 2004 version, you see there's like a hot key light, but there's also bounce lights. But these bounce lights are not naturally being calculated by the rendering engine. It's something that an artist has to manually put a light there and then basically visually decide like how much a bounce light would be compared to the key light. So it's a lot of hit and try and also visually making the total composite look realistic versus this 2018 shot. You already place one key light and everything else is calculated for you, right? Which is great. So that's the power of physically based rendering engines. So this is the lighting plan. So we usually start with the mood lights and the painting and then we place it. We don't have to dive into this like quite a bit. So so this is the setup for the shot. You have the main light source, which is this dome. And then there's the HDRI softbox, which is coming from outside of the window. It helps with some of the fill lights. But if you look at the structure, everything makes sense. Like, yeah, you have a light source there, and so you put a light. This was not the case back in the days, even like a few years back. We would have to place a lot of fake lights just to make it visually pleasing and visually, like physically possible, like plausible. Practical lights, RenderMan. Oh yeah, sorry, this is old presentation, so 2018. You can disregard that. Yeah, of course, it's rendering and computer graphics is not just for feature films and animation and whatnot. This was a really intense project. You can see there's, you know, so many frames at 6K resolution. That's a really, really computing like heavy project. So Milk used a lot of cloud-based rendering resources, which helped. NASA definitely uses this. So I did some projects for NASA as well, where we would use elevation data and then try to create imagery for it, because a lot of the photography, it's not natural, right? Like it is computer graphic. They collect data with their LiDAR systems, with their satellites, and then we feed those data into RenderMan to create these sort of images. Even for medical imaging and a lot of usage of computer graphics, not just entertainment for that matter. Non-photorealistic rendering, this is another use. What's new? Okay, now we have version 23 out, so I'm not going to go through all this. And also, I think this is going to be quite detailed. I want to keep this talk to be more open and interactive, so I want to keep a lot of time just for question and answers. What I'm going to do next is maybe I'll give you a brief about how we did skeletons in Coco. Oh, wait, okay. Fun fact. So this is the current state of visual effects, right? So you see two images on screen, right? One is real cat, one is fake cat. So maybe you guys can put in the chat and say which one you think is real. And we'll reveal the answer after the talk. Okay, let's go. So skeleton shading. What I'm going to do is give you a brief into how, and you all should already know where shading fits in the pipeline after watching that Pixar in a Box talk. Basically, modeling is done. We already know the shape and the volume of the skeletons, and now we're trying to figure out how it should look like. So what kind of textures a bone has, and how it reacts to the light, the material properties, and the different attributes of bone, so that it looks realistic or believable, but not necessarily realistic. So some of the challenges for skeletons, there's lots and lots of geometries, because in some of the scenes there are, millions of skeletons just kind of dancing around, and each of the skeleton has like so many bones. They're all in different shapes. Now imagine if you were to have artists kind of individually go and paint each and every bone. That's going to take years just to get a single bone texture. So we needed, that's challenge number one, which is the sheer quantity of the bones. Second, we need high level of detail for close-ups, because some of the skeleton is really close to camera, and then you're going to see it on big screen in theaters. That means you could have a scenario where one of the bone is really close to the camera. So you want to make sure you see all the details, like the pores and the striations and everything, versus background characters where you also see the whole skeleton together, and that also needs to feel believable. There are different kinds of bones, and they all have different directions based on the location. They have different shapes. So how do we tackle this challenge? Another thing from story point of view, director also wanted various aging on the skeletons, because I don't know how many of you have seen Coco, but it has Land of the Dead. And the idea is the skeleton would look more pristine and new the more people remember them after they're dead. And then as people start to forget these people who died, their bone also needs to, age with how according to the memory of that person in the real life. Now, so we want to have a control where we do want to shade the bone, but we also want this one slider or a control that can make a bone look really new to a really aged bone. So let's see. Matching topology in all skeletons allowed us to share UVs and primor data across skeletons. I don't know if this would, let's not dive into it. I'm gonna cross this. Most bones have cylindrical shape. Yeah, so that's at least majority of the bones are cylindrical in shape. So we can, what we're trying to do now is we're trying to find a common language between how to tackle this task, right? So we can say that skulls are for the most part the same, but they might have different scales. They could be short, they could be long, they could get squashed. All the different bones in the hands and the legs and stuff, they're all going to be mostly cylindrical. But again, depending on the body type, they could vary. Now, shader baking, I don't know how familiar we are with the shading process, but essentially, if we were to keep everything live and dynamic, if we try to render all this data, we don't have enough computing power to do that. So we need to, every step of the way, we have to think about optimizations and how we can push all this data, because some of the movies can be, these are terabytes of data we're talking about. We cannot really, if we don't think about optimizations, we could easily overflow our storage needs and also our server limitations and stuff. What you see on screen right now is UVs. Let me explain what UV is if you don't know what UV is already. So model is something that you create in wireframe form. Let's say you're trying to create a cube. You think of cube as a volume, and then they're different points, and these points create edges and vertices, and then you get a shape. What UV is unwrapping those in a 2D space. So kind of think of it as like a 3D object into 2D space. It's like unfolding a box and making it flat. What that allows us to do is now someone can put a data in 2D plane, and then it maps those into a 3D plane, right? So in this UV space versus XYZ, which is the 3D space, right? So now whatever data we have in UV space, we have a sort of like a lookup table or like a correlation between the two, right? So it's easy to paint in 2D, and then we can do something. I mean, now we have 3D painting tools and whatnot, but this is one way we UV and store the color data that feeds into the materials and the shaders. So there were two maps. One was that, and this second map, what we did was we created a seamless center, and then the other map which kind of overlays on the side. So basically, it allows us to create a cylindrical texture, and then on the edges kind of create these end caps, because most of the bones are kind of similar in structure in that sense. So you can see the overlaps here on the end. What this allows for is to get rid of any kinds of seams that you might see in the texture area. This is just to create a gradient that we can use for blending in the shader. Again, keep in mind, all this is in preparation to automate, because we don't want to do this for each and every bone, for each and every skeleton, because that's way too much. So we are trying to come up with a system that allows us to texture and make a look dev of these entire skeletons automatically. These are UVs in 1V space. So basically the whole skeleton kind of flattened out into a 2D plane, so that we can store the data in this format, in one image format. This would be much more efficient than storing everything on the vertices, and then we have to store everything in 3D. Here's a visualization of the UVs and how the different pores, so that you can see the render here. There were 16 textures layered, and this is the study of the bones. So you can see a lot of macro photography, and we're trying to figure out how the bone ages, how the bone looks on the edges, how the bone stretches, when it gets old. What's the structure for the longer bones versus the shorter bones? What's the structure for the skull? And we basically want to define all those things and keep it flexible, so that when we render a skeleton, we make sure that the right kind of pores go in the right location for it to be believable. Yeah, and things do get complicated. So what you see is just a tiny part of the entire shader just for this bone, right? But the good thing is, once this is done, we can just apply this onto all the skeletons in the entire movie, and it would be shaded automatically. Here you can see how the bone is aging and different kind of pores and different elements. So yeah, this is the final result, and that's how the skeletons of the movies were done. Cool. Hope you got some information out of it. I'm kind of shooting in the dark here. So I would say we should open up for any questions. And if you want to learn about a specific part of pipeline, or if you're curious about anything, feel free to ask. That would be more informative.
Thanks, Harsh. I'm just curious to know how you got samples of bones.
How do we get samples of bones? We have we have lots of bones, because we have skeletons in our art studio, because we have to study the human anatomy, and it's really, really crucial to understand the skeleton and the muscles and everything. Now, where do we get it? That's something I would probably not want to speak, or else I'll get in trouble,
I got that. Okay, so we have some questions. I got a question from Brijen. I'm unmuting you now, Brijen.
Hi, Brijen.
Hello. I'm just asking that when you work with such a big Hollywood movie like Star Wars and Avengers, then how these computer graphics were divided into the graphic designers? I mean, there are lots of graphic designers, and have you divided all work between them? How they communicate with each other?
I see. Wait, when you say graphic designers, you mean just like people working in computer graphics, I'm guessing. So essentially, it is a big project, and there are multiple people working on this project, and they all have different specializations. So for example, I specialize in shading and texturing and look dev. And there might be another person who is a modeler, and there's another person who is really good with effects and volumes. There's a person who is specialized in just doing clothing and simulation of the clothing. So it's a department structure. So as you've seen from the Pixar in a Box video, you might recognize there are different departments, but they're still in the same vicinity. So if you have any, in terms of communication, you can kind of just walk over, give them a call, or like it's a very, very collaborative process. It's not something that you could just, you could probably create short film on your own, but these kind of big production definitely requires a lot of people and a lot of communication between them. I don't know if that answers your question, or if you had something else in mind, please feel free to ask.
Okay, we have another question from Vishal. So I'll first take questions from the people who are doing the course. Brijen is doing this course, and we have Vishal Rana.
Yes, hi.
Hi, Vishal.
Hi, so really cool stuff. I am a big fan of animated movies. And hello.
Yep, I think your voice is getting cut off, but it should be fine. Let's go.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes. So big fan of animated movies. So my first question is what's the average time to create a scene? Like let's say in Coco, the last scene, the dance wala scene. How much time does it take to create a scene like that? Because it was a really complex scene. There were a lot of skeletons, as you said. So how much?
Yeah. Are you talking? I guess you're talking about the production time, not just the render time. Is that correct? Like from the beginning, like the idea of the scene to the final rendered image, not just the render time. Assuming that it varies from scene to scene, obviously, and it's not really. So how it works is we have sequences, and then we have shots. Sequence would be, let's say, the dance sequence. Sequence contains multiple camera angles, and each one of those could be shots. A sequence could be half an hour long, or even like 15 minutes long, or something like that. And then different shots are like 30 seconds, or maybe there is a shortcut or whatever, something like that. So when we're designing the movie, it goes from storyboard process all the way downstream. So we're not really thinking of it as like, oh, I'm just going to focus on this one scene and I'm going to ignore, because you want all your shots and all your sequences to inform each other, and there's a flow to it. And that's why the pre-production, the storyboarding, and making a pre-visualization like helps, because it or else you won't be able to communicate the story, and the story is king. That's the main motto. So it would be hard for me to just say that, oh, this scene took this X amount of time, because when I'm thinking about skeleton in that one shot, I'm also thinking about the skeleton in the other shots. I'm not just gonna focus on this one shot, so to speak. But overall, making movie itself, is something like Coco, that can take like years. From the initial idea, it can take upwards of 4 years to create one film.
And this is something which I am curious about. How many people are involved in a movie like Toy Story 4 or Coco?
Mm-hmm.
How big is the team? You said it's about 4 years. How many people?
People keep going on and off, but I would say you can say average of 200 to 300 people.
Okay.
to create one. It's different for visual effects side of things because multiple studios, multiple bids, and all those kind of things. You could probably see when you look at the ending like titles of the movie. If you look at visual effects, you would definitely see way more people in the list compared to Pixar, because Pixar, we have 1,000 employees in the entire studio. That includes everyone from hardware engineering to artists. So for a production, you would probably get around 200 to 300 people who are actually making the film.
Okay. Got that. We have a question from Akash Thakkar. Akash, I have unmuted you.
Hello, Harsh.
Hey, Akash.
So my question is that as you have shown some of the best sample of texture done in the great movie, so in the texture, what is the happening in the back end? Is it a color with a different shade or any other thing is happening?
Is it colored that is different?
The color with different shading means we in texture we are setting the colors with different shades so that it look more realistic.
I see. Okay, I see what you mean. So there's two things. There's texturing and shading, right? Texture is, think of it as like storing color information or float information or any kind of data on 3D model. And shading is the material properties. You can think of it as like material properties of, let's say, think about making a certain object, for example, like your headphones over here. They're, what material they are. As you move, the look of it changes, right? In different lighting scenarios, they're going to look different. So in terms of texture, you would paint that light green and the black, and you're going to define that, oh, this area is green, this area is black. And then but that's not the only thing that is defining your material. You also have to define this area is more reflective, green is more matte, and this black is getting way more reflection, right? That's one of the properties. So you have to think of your material in different forms. So color is one of them. Then there is reflections. There's the roughness, how smooth it is or how rough it is. There's the subsurface quality of it. Like, does your skin behave the same way as your headphones? No, because light penetrates through it, and then enters it and takes on the color of the screen, of the skin as it comes out. Your glasses, they're refractive, So you think of it as like a physical material, and texture as data that defines those material. I think, yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Got that. Vishal, I am now unmuting you.
Yes, so I was asking about the production time on an average. And I also wanted to ask, let's say you in Coco, you have the texture ready for the bone, and now you have to make a character, like different characters, and then you have to make it move. So how does that happen? Because do you use some kind of engine to make every characters move, or how does it happen?
Okay, so the question is about making characters move, like how does the motion happen on the characters? Is that correct? That's the animation process. So basically, you have the 3D model, like you have already designed the character, like you know how the character is shaped, the volume, character already has the color on it and everything. Meanwhile, what we have, there are two things. One is rigging. Rigging is the riggers take those models, that character, and what they're going to do is they're going to kind of define the armature of the figure. Let's say it's a humanoid figure. How does a human move? Then you have to define joints. You have to define what kind of force from that joints to the hands, right? Like there's all the kinematic side of things. So I'm trying to think how I can maybe you can think of it as like puppets, and a puppeteer is attaching those strings to the puppets, right? Now, when the puppeteer is attaching strings to the puppet, he has to think about where those strings he need to attach. He attaches those strings in a way that when he applies force, they move in a certain way that looks natural, right? That's the ideal scenario. So what a rigger does is he would define like different joints and make controls for it. And then he would pass this new model with the controls to an animator. And then animator, his job is to just look into the motion of the characters and the environments, right? So based on the story, he would like how to make a character walk. Then you would go frame by frame and initiate like keyframes, like he's on this side of the screen, now he moves to the center, then maybe he jumps. Okay, now when he's moving from left to right, where does the hand go? Where does each of the individual fingers go? You know, they need to make it blink. So they need to basically add all those motions one by one into the character. So it's quite a manual process in that sense. And the animator needs to have really good understanding of motion in real life and, you know, the action and movement and rhythm of different kinds of motion, you know. If you're dropping a ball which is made of plastic versus a bowling ball versus a ball made of rubber, they all are balls that you're dropping on the floor, but they will bounce in a different way. They would react to the materials in a different way. Now, that's just based on the motion. They could all look the same. They could all have the same size, but because of the material, because of the physics of it, it would behave differently. And an animator's job is to study that motion and bring things to life, essentially, you know.
So for the dance scene in Coco, the animator had to change each and every frame for each and every skeleton, right? To make that happen.
In the end, yeah. I mean, initially you can define some keyframes because in 3D animation softwares that we're using, that we use at Pixar, it's Presto. And once you define the rigs, so for example, let me give you a simple example. Like, look at my hand here. If I'm moving my hand like this, right? You can see there is a joint right here. So I'm going to simplify it. So there's a joint and then there's a line, right? And it's moving around this joint, like this angle is changing and nothing else, right? Now rigger's job is to define this joint, and animator is going to be like, oh, this hand is moving down. So frame 1, he's going to keep the hand like this. Frame 24, he's going to move the hand like this. Now our softwares can actually figure out if he has to go from here to here without changing the shape and the mass of this object. There's only one way, you know, to go about it. I mean, there's another way, which is, yeah, you can rotate like 360 and go like this. It's not possible, but that's something rigger has already defined. You know, rigger has already done their limitations. Like, you cannot go beyond this point because that's not possible. So in that sense, if you compare it to a 2D animator who draws everything frame by frame, they have to sketch each and everything, you know, one frame at a time, versus 3D animators, they have some leeway because, you know, because of technology, they can basically just define the major key points and then let software figure out in-betweens of those keyframes.
Yes, thank you. Any current projects you are working on that you would like to?
Yeah, I'm working on a couple. Like currently, I'm working on Jurassic World, and then there's few others. Wait, hold on. I need to think if they're announced. There's Six in the Ground was recent. Yeah, I guess the major production would be Jurassic World. The production was kind of on hold because of COVID scenario, but they have started shooting again, so it should be releasing next year.
You are also working on 600.
Yeah. That one's done already. That was a lot of cars and Michael Bay action. You know, his movies are a lot of crashes and, you know, explosions and drama. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So how many Jurassic Worlds are there? I mean, I've lost track now.
even I've lost track, honestly. There's so many. I don't know. Yeah, this one's gonna be good. Dominion, hopefully. Let's see. We're trying to keep it with Jurassic World. You want to keep the aesthetics and the quality similar to Jurassic Park. So although we are making CG, we want to make sure it in the end kind of has a feel of real life puppet. You know, just for the sake of original, like to respect the original Jurassic Park.
Okay. Okay, I'm now unmuting Vatsal.
Okay.
Am I audible?
Hello.
Hello, Harsh. So I have two questions. The first one is the shaders and PBR textures are same or different? And my second question is how the rendering pipeline works. Like all the sequences and all are rendered by the passes, or they directly renders everything after applying the textures and all.
Okay, so first question I think you asked was, what's the difference between shaders and PBR textures?
Yes, because I don't know. I know that some shaders are written through the scripts, but a year back I made some very few shaders in the what was it in the hypershade, which is in Maya.
Mhm.
So, what is different between the physics-based textures and shaders? Is there any difference? Or
Okay, so I think, okay, so what is PBR is a physically based renderer. So whatever shading or texturing you're doing, it's for a specific rendering engine, right? Like, so for example, I showed you RenderMan. RenderMan is one of the rendering engines. You know, if you're using Maya, you might have used Maya Native or Mental Ray. There's all kinds of, you know, V-Ray. There's so there's so many rendering engines, and depends on which rendering engine you're using. What PBR is saying that that rendering engine was made. It is a physically based rendering engine, which means it's energy conserving. So you cannot have a scenario where a light source is giving a certain amount of energy. Your material is going to absorb that energy. It's going to reflect some, but the total of that energy should not exceed your source, right? Unless the object is glowing. Does that make sense? So if the rendering engine follows this energy conservation law, it is a physically based renderer. Now, whatever shaders you're using or textures you're doing, if you're using a physically based renderer, you can call it a PBR texture, although that doesn't have to do with anything. I mean, texture is a texture. It's just some data stored on 3D model. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but shaders are different, like shading models. I don't know what kind of shaders did you use. You probably know about Lambert and Blend. Those like are a few of them, right? Okay. So there are different shading models, and they're based on different researches that are being done. A more complicated and recent shading model that is being used in a path tracer or something would be more physically based. Again, an energy conserving, which is physically based. So now a shader could have multiple things, right? As I talked to someone about, there's albedo, which is the color. There's reflections. There's subsurface. There's refractions. There is diffraction. There's all kinds of these physical optics, you know, the properties of that shader. So you need to make sure that shader is behaving in a physical way, because that's going to give you the most realistic results with least amount of work done, which is what we want, essentially. You define a few things. Oh, this thing is fully reflective. Maybe it's a mirror, right? So as an artist, they just have to define in texture that this object is fully reflective, and voila, it looks like a mirror, right? So anything that has to do with these kind of shading models, I would say you can define it as PBR shading model or texture. And anything that old school, which is not physical energy conserving, you can maybe call it a regular texture or shader. But again, these are the same things. And remind me, or you had one more question, right? That was about
rendering pipeline.
Rendering pipeline. What did you want to know about it?
Like how they renders the whole movie. Like I don't think it is possible to render everything on the laptop or desktop system.
Oh yeah. Definitely not.
It is a very heavy process, I know.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I heard the term like render farm. So how they are working, like how they renders whole the project, like.
Okay, that's a really complex setup. But what I would say is, think of it as like you using your laptop. You open Maya, you try to render one frame somehow on that machine, right? That one machine can take one frame to render 33 hours, let's say, or or 24 hours. I don't know. Let's call it 24 hours. Now, if you're making a 110-minute movie or something like that, and if you just have that one machine, your movie would take about 4 to 500 years to render, right, on that one machine. So now what you need is you need to distribute those on various cores. So you need to do some parallel processing. You need to distribute or rendering jobs on each frame on different machine, even sections of the frames in different machines, right? So there's a whole like server and render farm setup. So the Pixar render farm would have machines, like 2,500 machines, let's say. It's one of the 25 largest supercomputers in the world that is needed to render those. We have more than 24,000 cores, working 24/7 on this job, right? And even then, it takes like 1 to 2 years to render the movie. So that's where we are at in terms of computation. And render farm is this like giant building which you saw in that Pixar in a Box video. There was a render farm, and you could see all these racks of different cores and stuff. We have to keep it in a perfect temperature. It's like, and a fun fact. So the Pixar render farm, let's say you're in there and there's an earthquake, it's earthquake proof. If there's fire and you happen to be inside that floor of render farm, you would get stuck because there would be a countdown of 15 seconds. All the doors would be locked. All the air would be sucked out, and it would be vacuum. And there's one red button which you have to press within those 15 seconds. If you fail to do that, no more. Yeah, does that answer the question? I mean, not the vacuum part, but yeah, it's basically a huge computational challenge, and it's a lot more complicated than that. But yeah, it is a challenging task. New real-time technologies are coming in, which should hopefully help with it. But so far, they're not at par. The look that we want for visual effects movies, we haven't really had a success, except like few things. In Mandalorian, for example, we're trying to use more Unreal Engine and real-time technologies and use more GPUs. The latest RenderMan is an XPU system, which combines CPU cores and also accelerated GPU for certain tasks and distribute tasks on both of those things. So that should definitely help. Yeah, but the thing is, as we move forward with these technology and we try to speed up things, our movies are also becoming more and more complicated. So like recent Toy Story 4, one of the shots in the antique mall had 1 trillion polygons, right? Like try defining that. Like if you're defining a polygon, like there's vertices, right? One polygon can have 3 to 4 vertices. And you're defining like trillions of polygons. That's already like about 5 to 6 trillion points to define in 3D space. So super complex.
Great, Harsh. That is crazy amount of computation. In fact, I do research in cryptography, and for the last several years, many cryptographers have been using the power of GPUs to break crypto systems. Because if you take a system like PlayStation, or Xbox, then it's got a very powerful computer, and you will not get such a powerful computer for that cost anywhere else. So there are researchers who have created a farm out of Xbox or PlayStation processors to do cryptanalysis, because these are very powerful machines.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So one thing, Harsh, how much time do you have? We are at the end of 1 hour. Can you extend it some more time? We have some more hands up.
Yeah, sure. I can take a few questions. Yeah.
Okay. So let's target maybe 15 to 20 minutes more, and we'll see if we can wind up in that much time.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. Give me a minute. Yeah, you can continue asking questions meanwhile. Yeah.
Okay. Akash, you want to go?
Sorry about that.
So my question is that as you show the backside of the production, that the first in the early stage of the production, that the wireframing of character is created in the early stage, and then the other operation happen on the character, different color with different shade and all. So is that only the wireframing thing which is important, or any other things? And is there any algorithm or kind of thing to create a very accurate and good wireframe so that the motion of the character is happen smooth?
Okay, so when you're talking about wireframe, you're talking about modeling, or just the topology, which is the wireframe? Maybe, I think you're talking about modeling. Let's okay. So initially in pre-production, let's say there's a design of a character that's usually drawn, right? It's a 2D concept. We're going to take a pen and paper, we're going to sketch it out, but this character is going to look like a blob, right?
Yes.
And then this 3D artist, who is a modeler, they're going to take that sketch and they're going to interpret and define it in 3D space. Now this process is not just straightforward technical process that you can define with an algorithm, because an artist has to make a lot of judgment calls about the shape of it, the volume, so that it looks pleasing to the eye, or whatever the story is based on that, whatever the nature of the character is, right? If you have a cute looking character, the modeler has to make sure the shapes are cute, the proportions between them, the harmony, there's a lot of design principles that they need to keep in mind to create that. And once they do, there's another thing, which is topology of the character, which is the wireframes. So when you're sculpting, yes, you're using wireframes to sculpt the character. To think of it like sculpting with clay. So as an artist, they're just sculpting with clay. They're not really caring about the wireframe. Maybe there's like one big polygon, one small polygon. But once at least the major shape or art part of it is defined, then we can run some processes on top of it to even out the wireframe, make the topology flow in a certain way that rigor would appreciate it, and obviously there's communication and all those things between rigor and modeler, but it's not very automated, except let's say in visual effects you have humanoid characters, and there's a stadium, there's a football field, and you want like hundreds and hundreds of people in the background. You don't want to go ahead and sculpt each one of them, so we would probably create few things, and we would create algorithms to vary them in sizes, like make one tall, make one short, and all this, and then we instance them throughout the stadium and make them move. And this whole thing is procedural and dynamic. That works out. But for something that is close to the camera and stuff, it needs a lot of artistic judgment to create something believable. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Okay, great. Now we have a question from Prayush Dave.
Hi, Prayush.
Hello. So first of all, it's nice meeting you. And so I have a basic question. I am very new to this domain. So where do these animators that you talked about, animators or the different steps that you talked about, that modeling and simulation, so where do they basically start from? Or let's talk about, means if you can share your journey, where did you start from for animation and all?
Oh, okay. Like for the career wise, if you wanna, is that your question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was, I always am interested in painting. Like what I do apart from animation and movie making, I enjoy painting quite a bit. I do a lot of plein air work, which is like going outside, traveling to various locations and painting on site. So there's a visual side of me, that has a creative thirst. And then on the other hand, I also enjoy technology, which is, like the physics, mathematics, and like getting the computer science side of things. So for me, visual effects is like a marriage between the two, right? Like it's taking some of your technological knowledge, and then we're trying to output something that is aesthetically pleasing. So for me, it's if I just paint, then I start missing the movie making, and if I just do the movie making, I start painting. So that's how I kind of came to find this field, and it's different for everyone really. Everyone has their own journey, and I guess the common thread that ties us all is our passion for art and passion for filmmaking. So as long as you have that, there's so many resources to learn from. You could learn and dive into it. If there's any specific aspect of this that you would like to know, then for sure let me know.
Okay, so basically you talked about the animator that controls the motions of characters.
Okay, so you want to know
Yeah.
specifically about the people who
Yeah,
deal
so if
with
you can
motion.
share.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so there's various, again, they all start with sketching. Animators usually, they don't do as much paint work. They do a lot of sketching work, studying human gesture, like maybe try drawing people who are running and then have a sense of, I'm not saying it requires you to draw, especially 3D animation. People are now just diving straight into 3D and not really focusing a lot on 2D and traditional arts, which is also fine. I mean, as long as you have that sense of, observation, that's the key, I would say. So if you're able to observe the motion and exaggerate the motion in the right way to convey a story, and you have the passion for that storytelling, then you can learn all these tools. And there are various resources. There's like animation mentors. In fact, in Pixar, a lot of animators are from Animation Mentor. Not necessarily, you can go to, I mean, some people follow the conventional route, go to a college, learn animation, make a reel, go there. Some people have never learned, they're self-taught. Some people do animation mentors, so everyone has a different path.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
We have a question from. So, by the way, I think this was a common theme, Harsh, for many people who emailed me also. As in, what path do they take to
Right,
do a job like this? So
yeah,
it's good
I
that
guess.
came up.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing now. Even for me, I was in similar spot when I was in school, and I would, what paths to take. If I look at because I was born in India, and then I grew up in Jaipur city, and I was studying all like physics, maths, and at the time I'd have no idea about animation and visual effects.
Okay.
I just was painting, and I was just studying. And from a conventional middle class family, and studying to go IIT as usual. That's what I hear people are doing still. Don't fall for it. And then, so what I did was I studied, but then I collected my paintings and I applied to this college, Savannah College of Art and Design, and got admission. For me, I was not applying for animation or visual effects. I was just basically trying to find a way to paint, essentially. Yeah, and they were kind enough to give me like full scholarship, arrange everything for me, and I moved there. And then from there the grinding started, because I was not very financially stable at the time. There was a point in my life when I was living on streets and going really so challenging times. In such times you cannot really focus on, oh, I should think about how this is going to render, or like how this should look. You're worried about food. So from there, but then there's always a passion in you, right? Like, and without that you cannot really live as an artist. So for me, I need to paint to survive. I cannot just give up on that and find a way to take on like a Starbucks job and start making a living, and or whatever. Giving up is not the way. So as long as you have like that passion, like, oh, you really want to do filmmaking, you really love animation, maybe you really love games, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be these things. I'm just giving some examples. You continue on that path, and you work hard, and it's going to pay off. It's literally as simple as that. There's in terms of resources, you don't have to worry about it now because everything is online. If anything, like COVID is the proof that you can learn everything online. You can reach out to people, you can register for all kinds of courses. There's no limit to what you can achieve but yourself.
Thanks, Harsh. In fact, thanks for sharing the struggle, because I think everybody's journey does have a struggle, whether it's an artist or in fact, I mean, the person whom we know, most popular person from Pixar is Mr. Steve Jobs. And if you see his biography, then, I mean, there have been so many movies made on him,
Yeah.
You really see his own struggle. It's been quite challenging.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for sharing it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, I would say for people who are in such positions to not to blame the environment and not to blame their situation, but to stay positive and, be true to yourself and continue on the journey versus giving excuses. That's it.
Got that. Thanks. Okay, so now I'm unmuting Vrutant.
Yeah, hello. Is my voice clear?
Hello. Your voice is getting cut off, I think. Can you guys hear him? I am having trouble.
No, Vrutant, we can't hear you. Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, or maybe you can type it in the chat so Gagan can convey it to you.
Yeah, I just typed it in the chat.
Okay, so I'll convey that. Right now I'm unmuting Parth.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
So my question is more or less on your journey or career. So there is a lot of talking about specialization, like letter T. First of all, you explore the disciplines and specialize into a field.
Yeah.
So as you told, there are like 200 to 300 people involved in a huge project,
Yeah.
and you are a more or less specialist in shadows and texture stuff. So how do you figure out your specific interest, or is it the process you learn in the school or
Right.
during
Right.
your journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'm still figuring that out, honestly. Like when I started, I also do modeling. I do effects. I do lighting. I do all those things alongside. So when I started, I was just doing painting. I also did games. I started a gaming company of my own. I did data visualization work. I did concepting for Xbox. I did all. The thing is, you need to dive in one or the other. So you really need to go with your gut feeling. You need to ask yourself right now, am I enjoying this? And unless you try it, you would never know, honestly. So you need to try, give it a shot. And then if you don't like it, it's not the end of the world. You jump on something else. But the idea is not to dwell into it and not do anything. Just thinking about like, oh, what am I going to specialize in, or should I do this or that? And you spend like good 1 year just thinking about it. Within that 1 year, you could have probably learned like 2 or 3 things already. So maybe just go with your gut feeling and then try it. Give it some time. Give it like a month or less. Doesn't matter. Even like, let's say you want to try modeling. You can start learning and try it out for yourself. See if you enjoy it. If you don't, then just don't do it. Simple.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, hope that helps.
Yeah.
Okay. But actually, talking on this part, Harsh, enjoyment. I mean, I think. That I'm saying from my experience. I mean, yours might be different. That, like, I love teaching. That's why I joined this profession. But it does not mean that I enjoy every aspect of being a professor.
Right.
So I'm assuming it is similar for you also. Even though you love doing certain things, it doesn't mean that you love everything about the current job. And I think there are times when you kind of say that, okay, I can probably tolerate this much because it allows me to do other things which are, more important for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a distinction there for me, at least. I'm going to share my perspective. So when you mentioned teaching versus you mentioned job, these are two different things for me. When I think of myself as creating a movie, creating art versus creating art commercially, that's where the problem comes in, right? If you are, so maybe it's possible the parts of the job that you might not enjoy are the parts that are related to the job and not really the teaching. If there are things about teaching that you don't enjoy, then there needs to be some soul searching. I don't know. I don't know. That's how I feel, at least from my end. And obviously, this doesn't. Okay, there's one more thing to it. The task can be challenging. So when I dive into painting, I'm super inspired by something, right? Like, oh, I'm feeling really inspired. I enjoy this person's art, and I'm enjoying the process of painting. When I dive deeper and deeper, the challenges go bigger and bigger, right? Because you start to learn, and then you start to learn like different hurdles on your way. At that point of time, you need to do some problem solving, and you need to kind of get past that hurdle. You need to teach yourself certain things. That's when you need to be strong, because there are always ups and downs. A learning curve is never going to be exponentially going up. It's a stepping curve. It's like this.
Yeah.
There's ups and downs, but if overall it needs to kind of go up, it's not going to be smooth ride. It's going to be bumpy ride, but as long as it's going in a positive way, it should be fine.
Yeah, completely agree with you. Okay, now we have Bisaj.
Hi, Bisaj.
Hello, sir. Thank you for doing this. I'm a huge fan of Pixar and stuff. So actually, if you see my virtual background, it's from a Pixar film.
Yeah.
So my question was that, how are the pixels illuminated? You talked about lighting, right? So
yeah.
How do you illuminate the pixels?
Well, that depends on your monitor, right? I mean, wait, I'm confused by this. Do you illuminate the pixels?
How is the lighting done?
Okay, so lighting is, again, this is based on rendering engine, and how you define lighting is that rendering engine might have, rendering engine has already made software. You can obviously go as basic as you want to and start like typing everything on text, but obviously you're never going to finish your movie. But what you do is you define your key light. So initially we start with a painting, that painting or a mood board, so to speak. So in a frame, for example, this up frame that you have there, we didn't start by knowing that, oh, that little bird is going to be on top of the fireplace, or like, that chair needs to be here. That's the job of an artist. Initially, we sketch, we decide where things are going to go, layout artist and all these things. Once everything is in place in terms of lighting, now we need to know, oh, it's a daytime. What's the mood of the scene? It needs to feel nice and sunny and calming, or does it need to feel angry, and does it need to feel scary? Is it a nighttime or whatever? So based on the story, you're going to decide what kind of lights to use, right? So it could be an HDRI, it could be a sunlight, or whatever it is. You define those lights in the software, which is based on that rendering engine. For example, we're using Katana now for our lighting needs. So similar to Maya, if you are familiar with Maya, you can probably use some of the lights, define it in Maya. And then when you come to pixel, ultimately everything is about pixel, right? Like, because each of the pixel, what kind of color that pixel should take. And that's the whole game. And that definition of pixel is all these things, from not just lighting. It's like modeling, lighting, shading, texture. Like when you calculate all those things together, you do path trace to figure out what that pixel color should look like. And that's the job of these rendering engines, right? So that's what RenderMan is doing. It's saying that different artists have defined the shape. This other artist has defined the texture. This other artist has defined the lights. Now, my job as a rendering engine is to calculate, I'm going to take this one light beam, this is my light source. It shoots the light here. It hits this, object in 3D space. At the point of intersection, I'm going to start calculating all those things, like, oh, is the surface, what's the color of the surface? How much is the reflection? Should I go inside because this is skin? Maybe I should go inside the skin because it is subsurface. It's going to go in, it's going to go out, and oh, what's around it? Or what kind of light it is? And all the information of the environment, of the materials, of the objects is going to be calculated for that one pixel. And that's the color you see. And that's why it takes so long, to render, because it's so many calculations and so many things to just define the color of one pixel, right?
One last question. So what differences do you experience when working on an animated film and a live action film? Like suppose Toy Story versus Star Wars.
Yeah. So in terms of working, animation film has your own clients. We have in-house director, and everything is done in computer graphics. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of going back and forth and not having to deal with a lot of different camera footages and like matching to life kind of thing. We can design everything. It's like starting with a blank canvas and painting on it, versus in live action, we are working for a client. There's a shoot done, and what they're going to do is how visual effects houses work is, I'm currently with Lucasfilms. There's different like frame stores, there's double negative, and all these different places, they all work for a movie. So for example, let's take a movie, Marvel's Avengers. Now they're going to do a shoot on location. They're going to ship these footages to all these different companies, and they're all working for this client. So it's much faster paced. The work is much more realistic and based in life, because we need to make sure our CG elements match the life and the actors and the staging and everything, right? So it's not as focused on style, I would say. Maybe for certain movies, I mean, like Space Jam or, oh shit, is that announced? Yeah, or like Jurassic Park or stuff like that. You know, we have dinosaurs, but there's certainly like a slight bit stylized. Yeah, but the major difference would be working for yourself versus working for someone else, and all the things that comes with it. You know, from like deadlines to how you handle time, how you handle the yeah, I don't know if you wanted to know more about the production side of things, which is like this bidding process and the actual business of it, or if you wanted to know more about the rendering and those. In terms of rendering, it's kind of the same. It's not much difference except the look. If you Pixar animated movies are, you know, they have a certain Pixar style. You can see it, and I can tell like the background. I can see it's instant. Everyone can know like, oh, it's stylized. It's not realistic, but it's believable. For visual effects, it's you know, just like the cat image that I showed you, you know, it's 1-to-1, like exact match. So sometimes we have to replace digidoubles, like the actors on the scene, because they cannot do a certain action because, you know, because of the stunt limitations or the shot that we want. Then we need to make that actor in computer graphics and make it look believable, so that when people watch movie, it's like magic. You know, you're performing a magic trick. People should not know that there's visual effects on the scene. When you see a movie like Jurassic World, most people think, oh, it's only the dinosaurs that are fake. But no, like pretty much everything is fake, you know.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. On that note, guys, make sure to tell me which one was the real cat.
I got one answer for that. That left one is real. Let me read.
Should I show the image again or share that? Let's see.
Yeah. All are saying left is real. Meanwhile, I'll read the question from Vrutant. His audio was not working earlier. His question is, why is it so that Indian animation studios are not able to match the CGI and animation quality of other studios abroad? Is it the technological gap, or that people don't pursue this domain in India much?
Why would you say Indian animation studios are not able to match the CGI? I'm not like, honestly speaking, not too aware of. I know that there are certain studios like MPC in India and some of the branches of MPCs in Bangalore and Mumbai, if I'm not wrong. And they are actually doing pretty good work. They're producing images that go, like, for example, Jungle Book. A lot of the major part of the work was done in India. And in fact, a lot of companies are outsourcing their work in India now to, and they're making good quality work. I'm not aware of any Indian origin studios, like a studio that is, let me think of it. No, like Prana Studio was there, but I think they got bankrupt. No? But that was, yeah. Sorry, I'm not too aware of any. If you're talking about any specific studios, please let me know. But I think in terms of talent, in terms of people working, there's definitely good work going on in India as well.
Okay, I think Vrutant, you need to stop watching Chhota Bheem now.
Oh yeah, yes, that's India.
Okay, so I think for the cat question, most of the answers are that the one on the left is the real one. That's what.
Yeah, that's yep, that's good answer. Thank God I didn't put any prize on it. Had be broke. Good job.
Good. So I think I don't see any more raised hands or questions in the chat. So
okay. Perfect.
So I think this is late for you also. It's almost 10 o'clock there, right?
Yeah. I think we're running a little over, but you know, if you have any questions, feel free to you know, give it to Gagan, or you can reach out to me on like my website or Instagram, and I'll try to answer if as I get time. And yeah, hopefully this was somewhat informative, and sorry for being so disorganized. It was quite last minute, but yeah, hopefully you take something out of it that helps in your journey.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Harsh. Thank you so much for taking out the time. It was a cold call from my end. I saw your cookie and milk uh, photograph. I mean, it looked like a photograph to me. I saw it on Renderman website, and those are also my weaknesses, cookies and milk. So I just thought I'll get in touch with you and find out more. And
Right.
thank you for accepting the invitation from a complete
Of
stranger
course.
for speaking with the students. I think it's extremely useful to talk to somebody from the industry who's actually doing this thing. What we do in academia is very theoretical, and sometimes it's tough to connect it with what's going on in the real world. So I think this interactive session has helped bridge that gap, and I'm really thankful to you for that. In the chat, I'm posting the YouTube link for you and for others in case they want to see it later.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the invitation, and yeah, I hope it was fruitful. So
it was very useful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harsh. Thank you so much.
All right.
And thanks, guys, for joining. Bye-bye. Good night.